Listen, I look like a ventriloquist child. Both of you get the hell away from me.
Yeah, no question. All right, James, we're going to get started. You ready?
You bet. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Hey, good evening. Welcome to the season finale of Dynamic Discussions. This is Joe Kent, Vice President of Performance Education for Dynamic Fitness and Strength. And on behalf of our owners, Kurt and Tammy Tambernino, and our producer, James Peters, we want to introduce Coach Brian Bott from Sports AdvantEdge. I'm going to mess up. Give me the city again, Coach, because I don't want to pronounce it wrong.
Coach, we're in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, I thought you were. I saw something else. You got a facility somewhere else.
Yeah, we're in Verona, but we have. Yeah, absolutely.
Madison. So you're right there in the heart of it. Yeah, I saw the one. I was like, is it Veronia?
Yeah, Verona.
All right, so, all right. So then I look like the fool just starting off tonight. Madison, Wisconsin. I can definitely pronounce that right. Well, Coach, thanks again for having us, and more importantly, thanks again for being a big supporter of Dynamic. And Coach Labuda recommended we get you on, and Coach is a living legend in that area. 300 wins up plus as a high school coach. So we're excited to dive in on some stuff. But again, thank you very much for coming on.
No, I appreciate you guys having me. Looking forward to talking about some fun stuff tonight. I've been obviously I followed your career, and want to get a chance to make sure I say thank you to you for all you've done, strength and conditioning. Guys like you and some others that were fighting in the trenches before all this great equipment that was out and all this other stuff, and so
all the technology that everybody thinks is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, those of us that still use pen and paper, we're still still grinding away. But I appreciate all you've done for our profession. Absolutely.
Yeah, I got my notebook out too, Ed. And just so you guys know, if you're on live and you want to submit a question, just throw it in the chat and we'll get it, because that's one thing I think that we've done a very good job the last 2 years, is making sure, regardless if the individual was on live or submitted a question through the internet, that we've made sure that the guests have answered or myself has answered. So we're going to jump right in. Coach, right off the bat. So having been on all the planes that I've been on, I feel like I have a good understanding of private sector versus what I call institutional setting, right?
Sure.
Whether it's high school, college, or professional. And I want to ask you, and again, because you coach, I'm going to ask it this way and you can understand why. Was the decision made for you, or did you make a choice to leave the institutional setting and go in and start your own business from the private sector?
So kind of a loaded question to start right off.
I told you. Start firing.
And not because of the way people would think. Okay. Obviously, I was at the University of Wisconsin for 13 years. Had an incredible tenure there. I got to work for, obviously a legend, and Coach Alvarez for I think 6 or 7 years, and then Coach Bielema, who's now in Illinois, went to Arkansas, and whatnot, who is also a fantastic coach at Wisconsin. We got to go to 3 Rose Bowls, things like that. But in coaching, and what's happened is, as a strength coach, is you're really tied to the football staff when you're in that scenario. Having a football coach as your athletic director now obviously guards you from some of the different things, especially when you have a relationship with that athletic director. Coach Bielema, as people know who may be listening, after our win against Nebraska in the Big Ten championship, took the head job at Arkansas. Kind of left our program a little bit in limbo. We went to the Rose Bowl. Coach Alvarez coached that game. We lost to Stanford. Coach Gary Anderson took over. I had multiple conversations with Evan Simon, who was going to be the incumbent head strength coach, and he was going to keep me on. So I stayed on for 5 months.
Okay.
Was going through, and I'm very open about this. Was going through a divorce at the time, and was looking at the scenario of, my job is I'm a father first. And, as a strength coach, we spend a lot of hours in our gym, but we also understand that, raising kids is still our first priority. Was looking at a scenario where I wasn't going to be able to have my kids at, the amount of time that I wanted to have them. And so, I said either to, my ex-wife, I said, either I'm going to get the kids on this amount of time, I said, or I'm going to quit. And, I went in the next day and resigned. So I can tell you how that conversation went. Evan, and Coach Anderson and Coach Alvarez, for about a month said, hey, sit on this, let's think about this. Let's see what you can do. At kind of middle of May, I kind of went back into Evan and I just said, look, my mind's made up. My 3 boys are the most important thing to me. At the time they were. Now I'm remarried with 3 stepkids. So I've got, a big family now. And so June 9th of 2013, I spoke to the team. They allowed me to speak to the team. I'm very emotional and, walked away from it, and so, the staff didn't force me out. Other circumstances allowed me to make the choice. I wasn't forced out. I made that choice.
Well, it's always good when you can make your choices, because I've been in the situations where sometimes you're not.
Yeah.
And, so Coach Simon's up here at Davidson, and I visit with him a lot. He's done a really good job here for non-scholarship football, and they've won a couple of the titles, and they're doing a really nice job up there. And, Davidson is a highly academic, totally different dynamic than Big Ten football and the monsters that you had. So you leave the institutional setting and thankfully on your own decisions, right?
Yep.
So it's always good when you can make your own decisions, and you go private. What was some of the things? Because I get into I'll prelude this by this. I get into battles a lot of time and I don't get on Twitter battles. I have an issue with individuals in the private sector who want to tell institutional coaches how they would do it better, and they've never coached in an institutional setting under the rules and regulations that you have. The private sector, there are no rules. I'm not doing a 45-minute hurdle mobility when I only got 45 minutes to train you. So when you go into that situation, and now you're used to what I call, you got to be extremely efficient, and you've got to really cherry pick what's the most important things when you're dealing with big group settings and rules and regulations of governing bodies. Now you go into the private sector, and really in the private sector, I would like to think now you can open up your toolbox.
Yeah, I would totally agree, right? You really have, because you not only have the institutional rules, the governing body rules, you have the head coach's rules. Which, whether we want to say this or not, that supersedes the NCAA rules.
Oh yeah.
And, you know what I mean? And so, at the end of the day, being in the private sector, you're able to, what I would call, slow cook your athletes. So there's no, you take your time. If you're going to get, like, hypothetically, if we have, 3 kids that are freshmen in high school, all 3, just like it would be in the college setting or in the NFL, when you get 3 rookies, you're going to get 3 kids that are completely different. One's got a great training background, maybe been training with mom or dad or their head, maybe the head coach or whatever. So they could hop right in, and go. Maybe you have middle of the road kid that's had really poor training. So now we got to start and take them back. And those are the kids that are hardest to work with, because when they've had poor teaching or poor training, you got to break bad habits before you instill good habits. And then you have the kid that hasn't done anything, doesn't understand. And those are really my favorite ones to work with, because they're like a mold of clay. You can really form them and do what you want with them, teach them properly, and things like that. So that's the nice thing with the private sector. The other thing is, because typically there's money involved, the kids are going to be a little bit more motivated versus when they're at, their school or things like that. Now, I'm very lucky because the schools that we work with, have incredible leaders at them and have really great kids at them. So we haven't really dealt with a lot of that, but those are, I think, some of the nice things with the private sector is you can really implement, your philosophies exactly the way you want to, teach the way you want to, and in the timeline you want to.
I also was good when you said about the head coaches. Yeah, and those head coaches will cost a strength coach a job when you're asked to do things that don't make any sense. But we're seeing it more and more, man. It's kind of it's getting tougher out there for the strength coach to have a voice. And people, when I say that, they laugh at me, and I'm like, look, man, I've seen it. Other people are telling us what to do and how to do it, but we're the ones taking the heat for it when it goes bad. And that's from anywhere from the head coach to administrators to, I mean, it's just, we're our own worst enemy, because we're like, oh, we're just going to work hard and put our head down and not know anybody, and everybody else is upstairs talking to everybody else, telling everybody how we're supposed to do our job. So it's good when you're in the private sector, because you get to control your own voice.
Well, and the other thing, Joe, that I get to control, and I'm very lucky with the schools that we work with, is that the coaches that we do work with are very communicative and very receptive, and they want to learn as well. We're really lucky, and that's, I say luck, but it's also by choice, because we can kind of choose the schools that we work with and things like that. And I know one of the coaches is on here right now. He's fantastic to work with. But I think one of those things is in the college sector, the other thing that whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, a lot of times is that strength coach is the coach's buddy. Something like that. You know what I mean? And that's real talk. You know what I mean? That's, they're buddies, and, and typically he's going to be okay if the head coach gets fired, because he knows if that head coach gets fired, he'll, end up tagging along with him. Yeah. And so, that's kind of where I think the college setting, unfortunately, is right now. And, even back in the early 2000s, I think what you get, especially when you're talking college or NFL, is, that paycheck that you're getting is pretty important. And that film on Saturday or Sunday, there's got to be a reason that guy made mistakes. And it sure as hell ain't my responsibility if I'm the position coach. And I've seen that way too many times. And instead of trying to sit down and be like, how can we make this kid better? How can I protect myself at the table to make sure, you know what I mean? And so it could be the athletic trainer's fault. It could be the strength coach's fault. It could be, the teacher's fault. There's a lot of other blame and complaint and defending going on sometimes.
So you brought up the relationships, and it's funny because I'll jump back and forth, but since you brought it up, we'll go to this question. One of the things that we talk a lot about with private sector coaches, when it comes to building relationships with the sport coaches of a high school, where they may contract you out to do the entire team, but then most of the time it's a few kids training. Sure. And then you've got to communicate. A lot of times they look at you as the private sector coach as the bad guy, because it's like, you're trying to steal my kids. And
right.
What are good tips for the private sector strength coach when they start getting kids coming in one-on-one, before you get into the group dynamic where a coach might be like, hey man, we want to bring you in, of building that relationship so that they don't see you as an evil, but they see you as an asset?
It's pretty simple. It's transparency. You got to just lay it all on the table. You got to be like, this is what we're doing here. Things like that. And some coaches are very receptive to that. Some coaches want everything in-house. They don't want their kids going anywhere else. And excuse me, I understand that to a certain degree, because you want, the camaraderie, the teamwork, all that other stuff. Everybody, you want everybody there. But one of the things that we do, and I think we do it very well, is when we're communicating. Let's say, Joe, you and I are talking. You're the head football coach at one of the high schools. We're talking, and I'm trying to talk to you about Sports AdvantEdge, stuff like this. The conversation is not, hey, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. It's like, Joe, you tell me some of the things you can't do because of, like, what we talked about before, rules and regulations. You only have an hour and a half with your kids, and you may have 15 or 20 kids that can't get all of the, the speed work in, or all of the movement work in. We can provide that at our gym for you. And we can provide maybe some of the auxiliaries that you can't get to because you have 70 or 80 kids in an 8 squat rack weight room. Okay. So that's how I handle that, is because I've realized, and when we were in Wisconsin, we had kids going other places. I'm sure in college, there's kids, like, let's not, these kids are still finding other places to go.
Oh, I worked in Phoenix, Arizona for 7 years, my friend. I lived in the Guru Central. Every street corner had a coach better than the college strength coach.
Absolutely.
And we had Athletes Performance Institute on our campus. Oh,
Which
yeah.
ain't cheap for those kids, by the way.
No.
But that's how I do it. And I'm totally transparent with the coaches. You know what I mean? If a kid's not holding up his end of the bargain, I would tell the truth. You know, if a kid's doing really well, I'm gonna tell the truth. If he's showing up late, I'm gonna tell the truth. And our kids know that. You know, I feel very confident in the reputation I've built as a strength coach and as a person. And I always tell the kids, we're not gonna lie for you. You know, if you're showing, and that could be to a college recruiter, that could be to his mom or dad, that anybody. You know, we're transparent as it comes. And I think that's really, you know, laid some good groundwork for us for some of the schools that we work with, because we can have straightforward conversations on what my philosophies are and what I think, you know, some of the stuff maybe that they've done in the past that we can change and go from there. So that's, you know, transparency has got to be where it's at.
Well, the thing you said that I thought was really cool, because I've heard a couple of my buddies who live in areas that are highly dominant with big time high school football, was what can't you do? We'll be able to provide. I think that could be the ice breaking question, right? Like, look, we're not going to come over the top. If they're squatting with you, they don't need to come over here and squat again. What do you get done? But then what can't you get done? We'll fill in the blanks.
Yep.
And I think that's the difference between people who are successful with high schools in the private sector versus who aren't, because it becomes a battle of, well, they're not teaching you how to clean right. You need to clean with me. They don't teach you how to squat right. And the truth is, a lot of times the private sector coach is right. They're not teaching them how to clean right. They're not teaching them how to squat right. I've seen it, but you can't double. Now the athlete becomes the one that's at harm's way, because you got two distinct coaches trying to fight over what's right and what's wrong. And that's what I think sometimes we forget, that what's the number one goal is to benefit the athlete, not to benefit ourselves.
And I would say this too. I think it goes both ways. I think what's been happening is now you have every guy that's played a sport open up a performance gym, thinks he should be a strength coach. And a lot of times they're telling the kids things that they shouldn't be telling them. You know what I mean? It kind of think it goes both ways on that. But I learned that real quick, Joe, you know, when I entered the private sector, because I was like, oh, you know, Wisconsin strength coach. I've worked with Russell Wilson. I've worked with Joe Thomas, blah, blah, blah. Well, your kids should all be coming to me. Well, those coaches, they have a lot of influence over those kids and those parents. And so at the end of the day, you have to work together, because at the end of the day, that athlete is the most important thing. So how can you figure out how to give them the best opportunity, fill in the blanks? And when you tell the coach, and then you have to follow through with it. That's the next part, is you can't just tell a coach, hey, you know, we're going to fill in the blanks for you. And then all of a sudden, you know, 2 or 3 weeks later, you're undermining them and being like, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then, you know, stuff like that. Because I see that in the private sector all the time, you know, and that's what, you know, we're going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do it. If you want more from us, we'll give you more. We'll always give you more, you know, type of thing.
So when you, with the high school setting, one thing that I found that was hard, because like you said, when you're in the private sector, you don't have your salary is based on how many kids you're coaching and what you're setting. I found that I had a certain philosophy that I was going to abide by. And you have these parents, they do research on you. Like you said, this guy coached Russell Wilson. We need to go train with him. But then they sit down and they're trying to tell you what they want for their kid. And I'm like, this is our plan. Like, well, what are you doing for speed training? Well, I've already told you that. Well, what about running, you know, well, they do this, this, and this. I said, I really don't care what this, and this is. How do you get to that point where I've told people, well, you know what, at the end of the day, this isn't a good fit. I think you need to go to the other place you're thinking about. Well, what do you mean? We want to train with you. Well, not by what you're telling me you don't. you want to train with me, but you want to do what the other group's doing.
Right.
How would you tell younger private sector coaches who are coming up, because you got to make money, but man, if I sell out on this one person, I'm going to cave to everyone else, and now everything I believe in gets skewed. You got any good tips to help that, or do you just got to stick to your guns?
You got to stick to your guns, because at the end of the day, like you said, once you cave for one thing, okay, where does it stop? It's like price reducing. When you're going to give this guy a deal here, well, when's the next deal? When's the next deal? Stuff like that. I'm, like I said, I talk about our philosophies. Obviously we use the Conjugate Method. I believe in it firmly. I've seen it, at all levels, and that's what we use. And I explain it. I explain, how we do different things. I explain our speed training philosophies. If you want to go run on a treadmill somewhere else, go run on a treadmill. If you want to go do some, other stuff, go do some other stuff. That's fine. And you know what? That may work for you. You know what I mean? But 25 years has told me what we do works. 4 to 5 high schools. Last year we had 3 high schools out of 56 remaining in the state that were 11-0. So I think that works. In football, we have umpteen, stories that we can talk about kids. So, and then go back to what we did in college with kids. So, I'm a firm believer, and we're not for everybody. You know what I mean? And I don't want to be for everybody. I want to be for the kids that believe in our culture and what we do. We teach culture just like we would in the college setting, on things that we teach our kids. And so that's something I really firmly believe in. I try and instill that in our directors at our different locations. We're going to be transparent. We're going to tell you exactly how we do things. If it doesn't work for you, you know what? That's fine. Because at the end of the day, if I'm trying to just get someone in the door to make a sale, is that sale worth the headache that I'm going to have to deal with over those 3 months of dealing with the emails and the questions and the complaining and, well, you're not doing this. I thought we're, stuff like that. So this is what we do. This is how we do it. Type of thing. And that for a young, private sector / entrepreneur person, that can be very hard. That is very hard. There's no doubt about it. But I'm telling you, if you stick to who you are, if your philosophy is sound and your beliefs are sound and you coach with passion, those things will come.
All right, I was going to ask one, but I want to jump in because you brought it up about the Conjugate Method. One of the questions was, how do you introduce the beginners to the Conjugate Method? So is there what I'm going to guess, is there a certain progression of patterns that you'll build in until they get into a more of a rhythm of the whole conjugate scheme?
Absolutely. So we start everybody, obviously we utilize the box squat a lot. I would say, and again, we're very unique now in our gyms. So we're not, like a franchise where every Monday, everybody in our 4 or 5 gyms and high schools are doing the same exercise because it's max effort Monday. No, Lucas in Beaver Dam could be doing different exercises that Robert at Edgewood or that, Sun Prairie football is doing or that I'm doing, because we have to educate and we have to know what our kids need. Okay. So from an exercise selection standpoint, our director selects everything. Starting off with the kids, we start them off with a bodyweight box squat to parallel. Because if they can't do that, then we can't load them with anything. So we bodyweight box squat. We progress them to a kettlebell. We progress them through, sumo style deadlifts with kettlebells, goblet squat. And then we look to either a front squat or a barbell back squat, going forward. And so some kids, and I don't hold them so I don't do a 3-week progression here, 3-week progression. If a kid can do it, he can do it. We start moving them forward. Now, is the load obviously change and does the rep progression change? Yeah. With our middle schoolers, on our max effort days, they're doing 3 to 5, where our high schoolers are doing singles. Same thing with the upper body. We start with dumbbells because I believe obviously dumbbells create stability. And I love dumbbells, working with dumbbells. I've always loved them myself and our kids. Then we'll work to a floor press. We'll also use some eccentric work with the barbell, and then we'll get them into the bench. So, excuse me, with the progressions, it's really how long it takes the kids to master that exercise. Once they master it, we move them on, and graduate them through to the next process. So, like in my gym this week, we had a kid with a giant cambered bar. We had a kid with a Duffalo bar and chains. We had a kid front squatting for triples. We had 2 girls doing a goblet squat to a box. We had a banded and chain box squat. So we had a lot of different moving variables, in our max effort in just one group. So I hope that answered the question on that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this on your, let me pull this out. I got bad reception.
Sure.
On the sumo kettlebell deadlift, are you using a single kettlebell or a double, or do you use a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. With some of our younger girls, stuff like that, we'll use one. With some of our stronger, our boys, stuff like that, we'll add 2, and things like that. So we'll vary it up. Yep. And we'll sometimes even use a dumbbell for a little higher variation. Tilt the dumbbell up and down.
Have you noticed on the when you're doing a sumo, I thought the double kettlebell sumo lift, I like using it because I think it shows some compensation issues, and you can really see the differences from one limb to another with the initial push. I know I do.
Correct.
When I use it as a warm-up. So it's almost like it's a built-in, what do you call it?
It's a built-in assessment.
Yeah.
It's a built-in assessment. And we love the sumo deadlift in all phases, right? Max effort, dynamic effort, teaching. You can really see, some compensation through all those different movements. And it's great. It's a great exercise for all athletes. There's, our pitchers. We use it a ton with our pitchers, our baseball pitchers. So we love that exercise, all variations.
Okay. Going back to private sector coaching, high school training. This is a question that I always ask myself. I wasn't in the private sector long enough to where I contracted out with a full team.
Yep.
So it's a multi-part question. So first is it generally the coach reaching out to you or you reaching out to the coach? 2 is when you're meeting, do they understand that if they're going to hire you, then it's your programming and they can, you can talk through stuff, but at the end of the day, they're hiring you for what you do, not to implement someone else's work.
Correct. So it kind of goes, the first part of your question goes both ways, right? I've reached out to many high schools, selective. I select the ones that I reach out to. Like I said, some coaches are very receptive to it because they have a great growth mindset, and they want to get better personally, and they want what's best for their kids. And so those are always the fun ones to talk to. The second part of the question, typically, I think most of them understand that, hey, we're bringing you in, you're the expert, and we're going to work through, the philosophies and things you have. Now, are there certain things that coaches like, whether it's a flexibility routine, whether it's a certain, thing in the warm up that they like, things like that. To me, those are things, if they really like those and they feel like on a day-to-day basis, they're going to help their kids, then we keep those in. Meat and potatoes, though, it's what we do. And like I said, because the conversations are had beforehand, so we kind of both understand each other and we kind of know each other. Those second part of that conversation becomes really easy, because they want what's best and they are looking to, get what's best for their kids.
Okay, all right, let's piggyback off that. So now you've secured the position of you're going to be so-and-so's strength and conditioning coach for this high school.
Sure.
From your perspective, how tough is it on you as the strength coach, not being a part of the high school community and being like an outside influencer coming in And how much time is invested in coaching the coaching staff that is on site to serve as assistant strength coaches? And how much time do you spend on campus?
So we have, we have probably 6 different models right now that we have. Okay. So model, we're going to start at the baseline model. Okay. It's with one team. Okay. So you're working with one team at that high school. So you're in communication with the coach, head football coach, and other coaches that are working in the weight room, constantly communicating, going over the different exercises, how they're taught, how they're accomplished, how you use, lasers, how you use a jump mat, how we incorporate it, how you hook the fans up, all that stuff. My phone is always accessible to them. Hey, don't understand this. Hey, don't understand this. Hey, how do we do this? Boom, let's hop on a call, shoot you a video, type of thing. So those are really open lines of communication. We write the programs for them, and then they administer them. So that's our consulting that we do. We have that with 3 high schools right now. We just started with 2 up in the Green Bay area, and then we have one with Sun Prairie football. And those relationships have been great. We've had a lot of great conversations. Coaches, the 3 head football coaches that really spearheaded it, growth mindset, want their kids to get better, and really taking an active role in not only the training session, but also, understanding the why behind why we do stuff. The next part, the next scenario is our, before school, after school program. So we have, 3 schools right now where we have one of our staff, okay, is at the school in the morning for what we call 0 hour, which the kids can do instead of gym class, and then after school. So, they're there from 6 to 7:15 in the morning, then 3:30 till about 5 in the afternoon. Our staff runs that. Coaches that want to hop in, they're involved. And I can tell you there's been a couple scenarios at a couple of schools that we have where, because that conversation now moves up the chain. Okay. So the first one I talked about is more, coach related with our consulting, because I'm working with coaches in the weight room. This one, now you're contracted to the school. So now, my directors, my trainers work coaches there. I work one-on-one with the athletic director. And those conversations with the athletic director are, hey, you brought us in. This is the scenario. This guy or this coach over here is not, he's trying to undermine us or whatever. Not working, right? So I've had a couple sit downs with a couple different guys and girls at schools, and like, this is how we're doing it. Athletic directors support us 100%. And so that's another thing in my vetting process is I want to make sure that the athletic director supports us 100%. So there's not going to be any back and forth. The next scenario that we have is the one in Wisconsin Dells, where we have a 0 hour, and then we're actually there for their first 4 periods during the day. So they have strength and con. Okay. So we do a 0 hour with their top, 40 athletes or so, juniors and seniors throughout the year. And then we're there for their first 4 strength and conditioning sessions during the school day. So we're there with a PE teacher, because that's in Wisconsin, you have to have a licensed teacher, obviously running the class, but our person runs the session. Okay. That one is really tricky. Okay. Because all the other scenarios that we have, we're talking about athlete only. Okay. Now you're talking about a scenario where, you could get a freshman or sophomore that, just needs a gym class.
Yeah.
Okay. General population. So then now you're talking about, some different things that you need to do. You need to kind of lower, go kind of a lower progression with exercises. 1, to make sure they don't get hurt. Okay. And 2, to make them, make sure they can execute what you're trying to do. The last scenario is what we have at Madison Edgewood. And that's basically, we have a full-time strength coach and a part-time strength coach. So it's like a college scenario. Robert, who's our director over there, done incredible work there. The year before we started, they had 67 kids in their summer program. I believe last year they had 215. And I think this summer we're pushing 250, close to that. And he works hand in hand with those coaches. So now you're talking about a scenario like, kind of like a Division III college strength coach, where you have one or two guys and you're working with, 16 different sports. So you need coaches bought on. And trust me, there have been a lot of conversations there, with coaches that are like, oh, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that. At the end of the day, it's our philosophy. This is how we do things. And so, kind of closing the end of the question, I think I do a very good job vetting the different programs that we work with, the people that we work with, to make sure we have like-minded people that really want to take everything to the next level and want to make the commitment, because everybody says that. I guarantee if we walked into any high school weight room in the state of Wisconsin and say, hey, what are you, hey, we want to take this to the next level. What we got? Okay, well, here's what we need to do that. You know what I mean? And very few are really, really committed to doing that. And I think we have, the schools we have are definitely the ones that are definitely doing that.
Okay, so on scenario 3 with the 0 hour plus the 4 periods, and Kerry, just shake your head. I've seen this. This has happened a lot of times in our area, or especially in South Carolina, where they start off, you have the strength coach, but because they're not certified, you need the teacher to be the teacher of record, because they're the ones taking attendance and grading the course.
Yes.
So in that scenario there, that's for people to understand that's how a lot of, but now when you look at your last scenario with the full-time, we're not seeing this much in North Carolina, but in South Carolina, some of these strength and conditioning coaches that were started out as teachers of record, they're pushing them to get their cert, and now they're becoming full-time teachers. What is the value, or what is the value from a school standpoint to have you contracted out full-time versus having that particular coach go through the expedient process of getting a teacher cert, and now he's in the teaching system?
Well, I think, the advantage is for that person is you keep their main thing, their strength coach. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times what happens in the high schools is they want to try and, whether it's save money or whatever, you want to try and make a jack of all trades person, right? We want them in PE. We want them the value that we have in that is we're working with just the athletes. We're communicating with just the coaches. We're not dealing with the day-to-day stuff. The other thing that we do there is we have a youth program. Now, Edgewood's a private school. Okay. So it's a great, I don't know if I can say the word recruiting, but it's a great recruiting tool for the school, because now you have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders coming at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night to use the Edgewood facilities and to train with our staff. So now they can see, hey, we have a guy that worked with the Toronto Blue Jays for a couple of years. We're, intern in Wisconsin, has worked, with us for a couple of years. That's pretty darn good for, some of the other schools in the area. And so that's I think the benefit that we have, being inside the school.
How many schools in Wisconsin I know North Carolina is way behind South Carolina as far as full-time strength and conditioning coaches in the school setting. Is there anybody in Wisconsin that has a full-time strength and conditioning coach that has to do no other coaching, no other types of ancillary teaching? He teaches, or she teaches, all the strength training classes in the school?
That does not do any teaching, right? No teaching in the school, just
well, they would be the teacher of record, but they're a strength and they do all the strength training classes. They don't have to coach another sport. They're not like an assistant football coach. They are the strength and conditioning coach of that school.
I would say probably the school that I can refer to that probably does it the best is Kimberly. Kimberly High School. They got Coach Manchi, Coach Mangan. They help coach other sports, but their primary role is strength and conditioning. You know what I mean? But very few, I would say very few that have that scenario where you're hiring a strength coach to be a teacher is essentially what I think you're saying. Who has a teaching degree? You know what I mean? So very few.
in North Carolina, what is there, 2 carry right now? 2 in the public school setting, several in the private school. In South Carolina, there's quite a few, and they're teacher of record, state retirement, and making close to 6 figures.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
And then forget about the private schools, but the South Carolina public schools have figured it out way ahead of most states that I've been, the more and more I'm out of coaching and I've been studying the model, South Carolina has been way ahead of the move when it came to high school strength and conditioning. And I think a lot of it was because of Coach Mike Schrock. I mean, they had a strength and conditioning coaches association for high school strength coaches 10 years before the NHSSCA even knew they even existed.
Right.
They've been doing strength meets like Florida does forever. I mean, it's pretty impressive to cross the border.
Right. Right.
Let's just say that the investment of what they're doing there is almost second to none compared to most states when it comes to the public school setting.
Well, my thought is this, okay, and I'm sorry, I understand that Dynamic has incredible strength and conditioning equipment. I love their equipment, but what we're seeing is so many schools overspend a lot of times, and you have a scenario where, okay, you could drop a little money on the side here to bring in someone to use this equipment and to teach the kids how to use it properly. The equipment isn't going to make the kids better. The methods and the teaching are, now having great equipment that you can utilize these great methods, man, now you got something really good.
Oh,
you know what I mean? But I think a lot of schools are ahead of the curve on that, where you got to bring someone in that can teach it and that has passion for it.
No,
That's what this profession is. If you don't have passion for it, you shouldn't be doing it.
Hey, you hit the nail on the head. I just talked to a former staff member of mine who's looking to make a career decision here shortly because he's been out of school for 10 years without a raise. And then they tell him they've got $50,000 and for a new weight room upgrade and $20,000 a year for the next couple of years to upgrade. And he's like, well, where's mine?
Right.
I mean, like hasn't gotten a raise, like not even a cost of living raise, 10 years.
Right.
So in the end, I mean, it's like, so there is value. And again, it's the people, right? Like you said, steel ain't coaching.
No.
So there has to be a value proposition from a lot of standpoints when you talk about that. So
For sure.
You've spent a decade in college. You've been over, is it over a decade now in the private sector?
Technically, yes. Technically, okay. Yeah. I started Sports AdvantEdge on my birthday, May 26th of 2012. Had a couple kids I was training on the side when I was at Wisconsin. So that's technically when I started Sports AdvantEdge.
So give me you and big time college, Power 5, like they call it Power 5 now. I mean, it's just
3 Rose Bowls in a row, so it's pretty good.
I don't even know why, like Power 5, where that even came from, right? Power 5, Group of 5. So give me the positives of coaching a high school athlete versus the positives of coaching a college athlete, and which do you prefer at this point in time?
Oh man. Excuse me. So the high school athlete, from my perspective, you get to, I think it's still a little bit more of the intangibles in them, because they're 15 to 18 years old. You get to really see some kids develop some leadership skills and some things like that. So those are some of the things I really like with the high school kids. I think the high school kids are a little bit more teachable than the college kids are. College kids, well, let's stick with the high school kids. I think the high school kids are more teachable because they're at those years where they're developing. Especially the boys, they're getting some testosterone in their body. They want to get stronger. So that I think they're a little bit more willing to listen. Comes to that. Everybody, I think the unique thing for me with the college or the high school kids is everybody has their own unique why they're doing what they're doing. Some people want to be really good at clubs. Some people want to be good multi-sport athlete. Some people want to, just look good, all this other stuff. So they have some different whys as to why they want to do it. Collegiate athlete, I would say the majority of them want to go play at the next level. They want to play in the pros. I think the majority of them, when they walk into college, their thought process, and I can speak from the, football, is that they want to play in the NFL. So you can see right away the kids that have the drive to go after it and the kids that don't. And so that's one of the hardest things I think about working with college athletes, is because I think when they walk in the door, there becomes a little bit of that entitlement because of the way they were recruited. Some kids get rid of that right away. Some kids carry that with them for a while. You have to get rid of that. And I think I'm glad I'm not coaching in college right now to a certain extent, because dealing with that freaking transfer portal and guys, every excuse under the book why they're not playing, and why they're leaving and why they're coming and going. I don't think I'd want to deal with that. You know what I mean? Wisconsin, when I was there, and it still is a developmental program. We expect our kids to play their best their senior year. We tell them that right out of the gate. So if you're starting as a freshman, you better be pretty damn good when you're a senior. And so that was really fun with them. Back to the high school kids, I think the high school kids have a little bit more ability to train them a lot harder during their in season, where I think the college setting has become a little bit more pro athlete-ish. You know what I mean? Wherever, the first thing they want to talk about is recovery and ice baths and Normatex and, soft tissue, stuff like that, which I think is important. But I think a lot of places have lost the ability to just grind their athletes, get after them. Now, I'm not talking about run their asses into the ground. Yeah. I'm talking about like just get after it in the weight room. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think that has been lost a little bit somewhere along the way. So
there's no doubt about that. It's become more athletic, especially in football, right? You don't see, the 1 RM doesn't matter as much anymore. Let's have linear speed, max velocity, max acceleration is kind of taking precedent. No one's posting, in your case, no one's posting the top 10 floor presses. They're posting the top 10 miles per hour. And it's definitely changed to a more athletic base, and the pure unadulterated who's the strongest has not been a matter of point for a long time in a lot of schools. And I still say that all changed even back when I was playing, when Jimmy Johnson took the defensive line and said, you're not 2 gapping anymore, you're 1 gapping. And now they could shoot gaps and they didn't have a responsibility where they had to read. They started acting. And once a lineman's first step was lateral and not straight ahead, changed the whole dynamics of the game of football.
Well, I think, when you go back to that, when you start talking about some of those things you talked about, we didn't have Instagram. We didn't have a Badgers Instagram page, for strength and conditioning and all that other stuff. The recruiting has become so competitive, And so you're trying to find, what the kids you're looking for are interested in. To me, there's nothing more exciting than watching a kid hit a 600-pound squat to parallel to a good squat, or hitting a good bench, or watching guys go nuts. The funny thing is I never shared so I had a unique situation, Joe, and when I was at Wisconsin for 3 years, I had the offensive line, the tight ends, the quarterbacks, the fullbacks, and the specialists. I programmed them the way I wanted to. Coach Herbert, who's now at Michigan, those were my guys. So, being a head guy, usually, you're overseeing everybody. Okay. I was kind of the head guy for these positions.
Gotcha.
And so, and in those years, those linemen were pretty damn good. And so, but I would get questions, from guys like Jeff Patrikas or Matt LePay, the news guys. Hey, we heard this, what he squat. I said, I'm not telling you what he squatted. And they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, and I used Gabe Karimi, who ended up being an Outlet Trophy winner. I said, well, Gabe Karimi has to go play against, Adrian Claiborne from Iowa in October. And I said, me telling you what Gabe squats that doesn't benefit my guy at all, because if he squats more than the guy, that's just going to ramp him up to play even harder against him. If he doesn't squat as much as the other guy does, the other guy's going to be like, well, this guy's weaker than me. I'm going to mow him. I'm going to blow. So I said, nobody wins in that. And they get pissed at me. I'm like, well, no. Like, I can tell you we have this many guys that squat over 600 pounds. You can figure out who does it.
Right.
But I think, but it come back to it, I think a lot of that stuff becomes recruiting. They want to show things that kids want to see, and show that, hey, we got athletic kids here. And I think those things that you brought up are the things that everybody's going to now.
Yeah. Speaking of that, do you use or do you recommend at the high school level? What is your take on, I don't want to call it data. We've always collected data, right? But the advances in technology, how do you value that? And how do you see that being utilized in the high school setting right now in your area?
So as far as tracking data, we do everything in a Google Doc. We don't use Team Builder. We don't use Train Heroic, any of that stuff. Our kids are not allowed to have their cell phone in the weight room, period. Like our kids, like when we do our jump testing or we do like our acceleration work or our flies, our kids write their own numbers in what they do, just like they would on their weight sheet. You know what I mean? So each kid has a folder. So like for the summer, you have 8 weeks built in. You can see the days you miss. So when parents start saying, well, he didn't get any faster. Well, he missed this day, this day, this day, this day, versus his friend who made all these days.
You took him on vacation for 2 weeks out of 8.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, so for that stuff, our kids record their own. So it's in a folder, they have it every day. They can see it. So we'll highlight it. So where your PR, your best number is, so you know what you're trying to beat, things like that. We collect the data as far as their max effort days, based on the exercise, so they can go back to it. But we don't, I don't personally use any fancy technology to record data, stuff like that. I put it in Excel like I've done for 25 years. Our interns or myself, I still enter data because I want to make sure that it's accurate, and so that's how we handle data. We have a lot. We do collect a lot because, again, it gives us that that big picture, and can show us some things. Hey, if their acceleration number isn't going up, their jumps aren't going up, is there something we need to tweak in the weight room? We always take it back to the weight room. You know what I mean? If something's not going well, what can we do in the weight room? Because I believe the strength is the main thing that you should focus on with your kids, especially high school kids.
So someone asked about flying runs.
Yep.
This is a very specific question. They said they don't have a lot of room in their facility, 50 yards of turf.
Sure.
You still recommend a timing system to test 10 and 20 yard flying runs? So
that's a great question. That's a great question because we have that scenario in our gyms. Okay. We have in Wanakee, I have 27 yards of turf. Okay. Before the garage door goes up. So how I handle that in the summer, that's when we'll do our flying 10. So they'll run from outside the building in. Okay. So they'll get a 20-yard build and do their flying 10 there. That's the longest fly that we run. Now, Robert or some of our guys that work at high schools that have, a turf field, they may do that. In the winter, okay, we do what's we call our acceleration days. So we spend a lot more time on acceleration in the winter because we can't, Wisconsin, I can't have the kids run in the snow into the facility. So we do a 5-yard build, and then we either do a 5-yard laser or a 10-yard laser. Okay. And for me, if those numbers are dropping, their acceleration is getting better. The other thing we do is we will do a sled acceleration. So a push, like kind of an old Joe DeFranco thing, where you're pushing that sled, anywhere from 25 to 50% of your body weight through those lasers, trying to work on acceleration there.
What laser system are you using, if you don't mind us asking?
Oh gosh, we have got it off Amazon. It's like $500. It's a basic one. I mean, I'm sure I have it here. Just keep going. I'll find it while we're talking.
Gotcha. another thing that was asked, and I'll word it so that it comes out the way I think that was being, they wanted to know is, like you brought up the Instagram, the Instagram generation and how kids are different. You know, and we hear it all the time from the older coaches. Oh, kids are soft. I don't generally say that. I believe society's changed so much that kids are who they are. It's just like I always say, my kids are unspoiled, spoiled. They just got it better than I did, just like I got it better than my dad did, because every parent wants better for their kids than what they had for themselves. So
absolutely.
So with that being said, though, in this day and age, because, you know, people talk about hard coaching. Remember, you know, it's like be negative Nanny and then build them up. Those days have kind of changed. So the question was, what have you done over time as the environment has changed, as society's changed, as kids have changed, to better develop your coaching voice? Because if you're not developing, like you said, if you're going to stick to the 1980s, you're probably not working right now.
Right. First off, it's called Speed Tech. That's the laser we use. So it's like $500.
You hear that, Terry? That'll fit your budget.
Yeah. Yeah, they work great, you know what I mean, for what we use. So that's for me is but as far as like, you know, my coaching voice, I think one of the main fallacies in coaching is that you have to yell to be a good coach. Now, there are times where it's, you know, they need their foot in their ass and to get after them. There's no doubt about that. But, you know, I think that is one of the biggest fallacies in coaching. And you can see that to me, a lot of times are the ones that separate the pretenders from the real coaches. The one guys just want to yell all the time, a lot of times because they don't really know themselves. So they're just going to yell at the kid.
The sore throat.
They don't know how to correct. So they don't know how to correct them. So they just yell at them. Okay. But I think it comes back to my first point is that when you're upfront with your kids, you know, I talked about being upfront with your coaches. You're 100% transparent with your kids. They know what they're going to expect. Okay. Because they know if they're having a bad day. They know if the exercise or if they skipped reps, which is something that we, you know, don't tolerate at all. They know all this stuff. Typically, if they're built into a culture like we have, and so they already know it's coming. You know what I mean? They already know that something's coming because, you know, they've, you know, they're on the road and they've driven off the road on purpose. Not they didn't slide off on the ice. They purposely went off the road. You know that they purposely went off the road. Now we have that discussion with them. And so I think the next part to that is you have to know your kids. You know, I know some of my grinder kids that want to just, you know, more. You know, those are the kids that you can really get after with a little stronger voice sometimes. You know, and some kids that, you know, they're just kind of feeling their way through everything. Hey, you got to have that conversation. And a lot of times, you know, one of the things I say, hey, mom and dad are spending a lot of money here for this. Yeah. You know what I mean? That, you know, and then I put it back in a way that I think makes it feel good is like, do you think that they would spend that money if they didn't believe that you could handle this? You know what I mean? You kind of use the Jedi mind trick on them a little bit sometimes. Yeah. You know what I mean? And but there, you know, there are times when as a group, I usually do it more as a group, guys. Like if and I think people have been in my gym. Like I talk to them like I talk to the college kids. Like this is the expectation. This isn't what's going on. Needs to change, or you can get out your phones and call mom and dad, have them come pick you up. And I've sent 2 groups home from Wanakee, you know, in a year, you know, and we don't do that very often, but it was to the point where it's like, you know, the standard's a standard. Yep. And there's no wavering on that ever. Because once you waver as a coach, they've got you. You know what I mean? Once you allow them to lower the standard, once you allow them to cut corners, they've got you, because now you got to reestablish everything. So if you're always fighting to reestablish culture, you're never getting anywhere.
Well, it's funny because I had kind of toned down that whole, you know, that you had to be that guy, bad cop, college is bad cop. The best thing that happened to me was spending that much time in the NFL, because then you really learn, like, you don't got to drop the F-bomb. Not everybody, no one's soft.
Right.
It's, and what you also learn is, and again, I tell people all the time, hell, I was part of all that stupid hard stuff that was going on in college football programs. And I'm like, some of that stuff is so irrelevant that it's almost laughable that we did it.
Right.
But that's how you grow. And that's how, you got to be willing to say, yeah, that was stupid. Like, you don't need it. Like I always said, I think a lot of times I'm probably my own worst enemy about talking to coaches, because I'll tell a college coach, yeah, that you don't need to do that. That's ridiculous. I helped start this stuff. It's useless. It's not determining whether or not you're winning or losing. I can promise you that. And that's what I like. That was the greatest thing about coaching the NFL. I never raised my voice ever. You didn't have to. They're highly motivated guys. That's their job. They don't want to lose their job. And it was great. Like I was like, golly, this was it. And again, my last couple of years in college, I had kind of grown to that. But like once in a while, you got to blow up. Kids are kids. It's a different dynamic. Sometimes you got to drop the hammer. But I also learned a lot about going all the way back to Boise State. I always had the same message, but the message was delivered by the time in the way that we thought strength coaches delivered those messages. In the 80s and the 90s, it was, beat them up, build them back, beat them up, build them back. You're not this, you're not this. And then by the time you're a senior, oh, we love you, and now it's a totally different dynamic. You got to figure out how to be smart hard, right? Instead of stupid hard. And that's the key. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with hard work.
Right.
I think we've all learned there's certain things that, that was kind of stupid. And like you said, the good thing, there's good and bad about social media. The good is there's a lot of good stuff out there. The bad is there's a lot of bad stuff out there. But when it comes to us doing our role, we've got to be very, very astute on what we're doing, because the parents and the kids can go to internet and find out from well-renowned people that coach doesn't know what he's talking about. Instead of you saying, I don't know this, I'll find out, you're going to try to make something up, and then they're going to check you, and then you're out.
Right. And the other thing too is that, I'm really, and I think we do a really good job technically with the things we do, and like anything, I think our directors are smart enough as to what to put on and what not to put on. Right. Because, I think if you look at any of our Sports AdvantEdge Instagram sites or even our Edgewood, I think that the technique is great. And I always tell the guys, if a parent can recognize that it looks bad,
we're in trouble.
We're in trouble. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, at the end of the day, when you talk about, people with an untrained eye seeing things and they're like, yeah, that don't look right. Well, you pretty much lost that customer. Yeah. You know what I mean? You've lost that business. And so, but again, I go back, I think what we put on social media is really good. We try and do educational stuff. We try and do motivate. We try and hit a wide gamut. We try and showcase some different things that we do. But I think we try and give back as well, to the things that we believe in, and hopefully, we're making it. I think we're making a differse. You know what I mean? In
it's
what
obvious with your reach and what you've been able to accomplish and the amount of kids that you're reaching. You're not going to make that kind of difference if you weren't doing something right.
Appreciate it.
That's the biggest thing that I've learned. And I've told everybody after spending time in the private sector, whether I agree or disagree with the way people run things, and I'm talking about in anything, not just performance facilities. If you've developed a sustainable model in a private sector brick and mortar facility with your name on it, I got respect for you, because I know how hard that is. I mean, that's an extremely hard thing to accomplish, being a small business owner where you're like you did. You took a leap of faith. You chose family over money in some respects to start out, and you won because you bet on yourself and won. And to see that happen across the board and to see what some of these people I know have been able to do from betting on themselves, like I said, I may not agree with one thing that anyone says, but I know this: that dude's been in business for 10 years and he supports his family and he's got his name on the storefront. That person, I gotta respect what he's done regardless.
And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, the credit doesn't run downhill. And it should, because, and I say this in every talk I do, Joe, if I ever got hired back at the college level, my staff would be my staff. You know what I mean? I'd bring as many of them.
Oh,
I'd
yeah.
bring my directors, and I would bring as many of as our assistants as we could put on that staff. I wouldn't look anywhere else. I wouldn't trade any of these guys for anything.
That's a different discussion for a different day. But that's like the same thing with me. Like, I've got a lot of people. Oh, I'd love to work for you. Hey, I'm sure you would, but if I got a job tomorrow, I know what 4 people are getting called.
Yep.
Like, and that's nothing against you.
Right.
But I know who helped me get to where I was at.
Yep.
And
No doubt.
I know who I need to get me to where we need to go as a staff, and what they're going to ask us to do. And I think that's the hard thing. And that's why, like, the internships, the lack of graduate assistantships at Power 5 conference schools now, where we were able to come through and build these younger coaches up, the dynamics change so much. It's very, very hard because most of the people who are getting jobs have their crew, and it's hard to break in. Very few times are you going to go into it, unless it's an intern, right? Where you don't have an idea what your depth chart is. I got my depth chart, and it's hard to get on that depth chart.
Yeah.
It's easy to get off, but it's hard to get on.
Well, and the other thing too, you brought up internships and GAs. I just want to say, I hope that college strength coaches are appreciative of these people. You know what I mean? That what they're doing, for them. We have interns and things like that, and they get treated like part of our staff. And we've gone through, and Robert's kind of spearheaded this. We basically treat our interns like a graduate level class now. Week 1, this is your assignment. Week 2, 3, all the way down. You have to read this book. You have to, we'll give you a book on leadership. That 3 books they have to read. They have different assignments. And this is your progression. And at the end, it's basically build your resume. And the things to help them get a job. And the other part that's really nice for me that I don't have to deal with, like in a college setting, someone's really good, I find them a job with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Grant, who's my guy in Wanakee right now as an assistant, halfway through his internship, I'm like, I got to keep this guy. I'm not letting him go. You know what I mean? And at some point he'll be a director with us because the way he goes about his business.
Are you recruiting, or I shouldn't say, I guess recruiting is a good term. Are you recruiting your interns from the university, or is it a free for all across the country?
It's more in Wisconsin. We've developed relationships with our Division III schools, and then a couple of the other schools.
That conference is packed.
Yes, loaded.
When I was coming up, Wisconsin Lacrosse's GA program for strength and conditioning was ahead of its time.
Yeah. So we get kids from Platteville. We'll probably get a couple kids from Ripon, where my son plays, and things like that. Whitewater, Lacrosse, Eau Claire. Zach Ruck is the strength coach over at Eau Claire. And so we just try and develop relationships with the people at the school. And if they, and now they're at the point where they know what we expect. So, I had a lady actually kind of nix an intern when he came and interviewed. I said, "What do you think of him?" She's like, "I don't think he's going to be able to make it with you." And I was like, "Okay, I appreciate the honesty, because she's like, I just don't want you to waste your time,
Oh no, we had a couple of people want to send us interns, and they were told by their intern director you couldn't make it working for them.
Yeah.
You want to look somewhere else. Hey, before we finish up, a couple of things because of the private sector stuff, and I think it's important we get out there. Let's talk about some of the business stuff, and when it comes to finances and charging, right?
Sure.
And again, obviously the market value of different states are different, but what are some of the going rates you see when you own a sports performance facility? Like, for example, I come in with my son, but I want one-on-one training. I know that's going to cost me a premium. What do you see in your research? Like, what is an average per hour session going to cost for a high school athlete that wants one-on-one training?
If it's with me, 75 to $100, somewhere in that range. It's going to depend.
Do you think that that's standard almost across the United States for that?
I think it's pretty good. You know what I mean? I think it's at. I think for me it's a little low, but
Yeah,
I think
I already know my number is not that.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I think it's a little low, but again, that could be the area we live in. And at the same time,
Well,
I
seems like a lot of people say that 75 to 100, and I'm like, all right, I get it. So then if I bring my kid in, I had different, I'm sure you have like different names for your groups. Like I had Block Zero, I had general physical preparation for Olympic sports, general physical preparation for high school football, and then I had my elite stuff. So if I come in, I'll start off with this. I don't believe in coach to athlete ratio. I think that's a sell for coaches to tell me that, oh, we have a 6-to-1 coach to athlete ratio. That's because you can only coach 6 kids. Right. Guy like you coached in college, you can probably coach 100 just as good as you can coach 6. I know I did, and I proved that to every customer I had when I threw that out. And they would watch me coach the football group that had 25 kids in it by myself. They couldn't believe the amount of coaching that they got. So, but my question is, do you cap those groups?
So we have a couple different groups. The first one is youth development, and that's our 8 to 11-year-olds. Okay. The next one is going to be more of our strength and performance, or our semi-private. So it's a little bit more individualized, for the kid. And then the last one is just our elite speed. So it's for the kids like that are in, your different high schools that aren't getting that speed work. They can come and do it with us. So the youth development is really our introductory stuff, teaching, things like that. And then semi-private. So we really have 3 different groups that we go. My NFL guys, they do private. You know what I mean? They do small group. Yeah, absolutely. But our college kids that come back, they're in semi-private. So we'll have a couple college kids, right next to some 7th and 8th graders. I think it's good. I think that's good. I think it's good for the young kids to get. And it,
those kids that came through from 7th grade that are college, because that motivates. Hey, that was you.
Those are the best.
Right there, that was you 10 years ago.
Right. Those are the best kids. And we do have some of those kids, which is awesome.
So is it more conducive to the individual who runs a facility to do reoccurring fees or pay per like, hey, I'm going to do this 8-week elite speed program?
So we do. Yeah, we have both. We have both options, Joe. We have 3-month, 6-month, yearly unlimited memberships, which you can pay upfront, which you get a little bit of a price break, or you can pay contractually month to month, so auto withdrawal. That one is going to be a little bit more expensive, obviously, with credit card fees and just kind of pain in the butt trying to chase that down. Or we have session packages, 10, 20, 50, or 100. So in other words, like a 3-month unlimited, so they can come every day. 4 or 5 days a week. The session packages, let's say they buy 100, but I'm a kid that's a multi-sport athlete, and I know I'm only going to train 2 to 3 times a week. Well, they don't expire. So you've now gotten, 18 months worth of training that you just paid up front for. So it's really, I offer both because I think it's advantageous to give people options with that. I would say that probably 70 to 80% of the people choose the 3, 6, and yearly unlimited packages. Because it's just, and the way I talk to them on that is this: look, I understand you're not going to come 4 days a week for 50 weeks out of the year. That's not, but your goal should be anywhere between 100 to 150. And if you get over 150, that's 3 times a week. You know what I mean? If you're getting over that, on the average, right? We know sometimes, like in the summer, most kids are going to come 4 to 5 times a week because they don't have anything that conflicts with it.
Right.
Get into the fall, well, they got football and stuff, so maybe they come once or twice a week. Then they got that break between that and wrestling or basketball. Now you see them 4 times a week. Well, then they're back in basketball. But, some kids train right through that. I mean, I had a kid that just left to play for Iowa. I mean, he trained 4 days a week during basketball after football season, and then trained 4 days a week during baseball season. And he was an all-conference basketball player, all-conference baseball player, but he would come at 5:30 every morning, from Sun Prairie. So he drove a half hour.
Yeah.
That's why he's playing in the Big Ten, though, because he's just built a little different.
Right. Do you have one specific sport that dominates your facilities more than others, or is it pretty well rounded?
I would say pretty well rounded, because I think a lot of our kids are multi-sport athletes.
That makes sense in that state, because I've heard that that's a state where it looks like a lot of kids do more. Because I know, like in certain areas, I was talking to a buddy of mine, for whatever reason, they just were overpopulated with women's field hockey and women's soccer. Like there was another group down the road that kind of had all the football kids.
Yeah.
And they took the initiative to go with the women's sports, and I think they hit.
I mean, their checks cash too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean,
they're a lot easier and better to coach. I can tell you that.
Well, and at the end of the day, you know what I mean? You're limiting yourself.
Yeah.
Why would you limit yourself? I mean, like when people ask us, like I never, ever, ever, someone will come in and say, hey, he's a baseball player. What do you do for this? What do you do for this? I said, this is what we do. We're athlete specific. We're going to make you a better athlete, which means you're going to be able to run faster, jump higher. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be more durable. So when I give you back to your club coach or your baseball coach, all right, he has a better product to develop you as a baseball player. The parents are like, well, this. And I said, no. I said, until he's getting paid money to play the sport, I said, that's how we're doing it. Now, when Rob Havenstein from the Rams walks in the door, I'm going to do a little bit more O-line work with him, and stuff like that. So that's just our belief, I mean, it's not your job yet. So you got to try and maximize everything you can.
Well, and I think even then, right, like I've tried to explain to most of the parents when they talk about, sports specific, well, you take out a few sports and some uniqueness, but every sport needs to be strong. Every sport needs to be fast. Every sport needs to be explosive. Every sport needs to be in shape. So in the end, do I need to full power clean a basketball player? Probably not, because they're not getting in that type of, but to hang clean them or do a dumbbell snatch, that's the same thing. We've got to develop power.
Right.
Everybody's got to learn how to sprint. Like it doesn't matter what sport you play. If you run with poor mechanics, you're not going to get up and down a field or a court or be able to move laterally on a tennis court if you're not being prepared for that. And so there's a lot of similarities that I don't think people talk about. Like, hey, well, what are you doing sport specific for this? Well, what's different than that sport doing this? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I kind of find it funny.
Yeah, when people ask me, I'm like, we box squat. Well, what do you do for explosive power? We box squat. What do you do for speed? We box squat. What do you do for upper body strength? We box squat. You know what I mean? It all, you know what I mean? I mean, and then we start explaining to them, then they start to get it. But, so.
Well, I think that, Coach, I want to make sure we got the high school or college. What was the decision? Hit that right off the bat. Versus organization, hit that off the bat. Talked about the development of the high school, got the 50-yard deal, got the intro to Conjugate. Coach, man, I think we had a hell of a show.
Awesome.
What a great way to end season 2. And man, we appreciate all you're doing, because all the high school strength coaches in particular, man, that niche has just gotten catastrophically better. When I was in college, we didn't want I told parents on recruiting trips, I'd rather your son never lift weights when he came to play for us. And now the jobs that the high school strength coaches are doing so good now, it's trickling down into middle school. Like when I first started talking about block 0, like when do you start it? It was like, well, you should start at the second semester of 8th grade to get them prepared for high school.
Right.
Well, now it's been such a good job. It's like, hell, block 0 to me is a middle school program now. It's like the entire middle school build a curriculum off of that. So we appreciate all the high school strength coaches, and And I'm sure with your time in college and working with the pros, man, you just got a wealth of knowledge for those kids. I hope they realize how fortunate they are to have individual like yourself and the staff you do. So again, from us at Dynamic, from me personally, from Kurt and Tammy, our owners, and from James, we want to thank you for coming on. And for everybody else, here's what we're thinking. We don't know what we're going to do next year for a platform. James and I and Tammy are discussing it. So you may see surveys coming your way to ask you what's the best way to launch season 3. So be on the lookout. We want to try to reach more people. We want to try to be more engaging. We want to try to make it simpler for you guys to all be able to jump on faster. So that's something you can see over the next few months as we try to iron it out first. But again, I want to thank James personally, man. James stays up extra for this once a month, and he's got to be the one who cuts it all up.
Wouldn't miss it, Joe.
Yes, you would. You know you want to go to sleep. I want to go to sleep sometimes. We were going to these 8:30s. But on that being said, again, thanks to everybody for always joining in. And we've had, Ed and Kerry and Adam. I mean, you guys have been on multiple shows with us. So thank you for your guys' support. And again, we'll see you guys down the road at a clinic or something. And if not, feel free to reach out to us whenever you can. Kerry, we got to hook up, man. I know you ain't. How many more weeks of teaching you got? Oh, you're done. We will definitely have to hook up here shortly. All right, well, we'll see everybody. Thanks again. And again, have a great summer.
You guys appreciate it.
Take care, everybody.
We'll
Good
see you.
seeing you.